Hello, and welcome to the innovation stage. My name is Sean Cheney. I am a Chief Controls Engineer for Pearson Packaging Systems. Today we're going to talk about digital twin technology. This is a really exciting technology and should be important to you because it allows us to really reduce the risk that is associated with traditional methods of machine and equipment development. At the end, you're really interested in making sure that you have a robust solution, and digital twin technology allows us to do that through animation, simulation, and emulation. We'll talk about more of those details as we go through the presentation. This can be done on an individual process level, it can be done on discrete equipment, or at a system level with many pieces of equipment all tied together. The point is that digital twin technology really allows us to accelerate through the design and concept level processes and reach a final solution much faster than traditionally done. Animation is the first step in a digital twin design that allows a concept to be developed that you can then further design your system, look at product flow. If at any point in the process something isn't working, we can backtrack and revisit this. And in a virtual world, that becomes very clean and simple to be able to do that. Moving forward, we can look at this particular animation. This is showing products coming in at the top right on two high conveyors. They're then being conveyed with some elevators to a lower level of conveyor. That circles back around and hits some final elevators that drop that down to the level that the robot needs to be able to process the material. Pallets, when being finished, will discharge from the cell, as we can see here now, and they'll get pallet wrapped and then discharged further to be taken away with a forklift. So all of this can be explained. You can see the flat model of the layout of the plant there in the background on the floor. That is traditionally how this would be discussed and visualized. So the animation really lends a powerful tool to be able to see what the concepts are and be able to share that with non-technical and technical people alike for all the stakeholders. Let's go ahead and speed this up a little bit, and you can kind of see the whole process flow and kind of get a sense for what things look like as the machine executes and runs over a long period of time. Here you can see where we've actually selected some switches now and see what it would look like to go to a manual operation if the products need to be diverted or if they don't fit within the pallet SKU that's currently being processed by the robot. In this example, two engineers were working on the design of the chute, and this allowed a representation or an animation of how this might work with a two-bottle configuration. When we looked further at other configurations that might be presented, in the bottom we've got 4 bottles, and the chute design was not satisfactory. So we were able to go back to the drawing board and redesign this. This saved us a lot of time. We didn't have to actually get the material and evaluate this in real life and wait till the equipment is actually running. We could do it all beforehand. In this animation, we have a lot of products flowing at a very fast rate coming from the top right of the screen. Those are being serviced by 5 robots that are progressively loading these into cases that are in a counterflow orientation. This visually is pretty simple to understand what's happening. It would be difficult to share this in another way. I really like this animation. It has a lot of details in a very small space that would be difficult to communicate effectively on a flat layout as done traditionally. Here we can see the pallets being discharged and restacked at the beginning for more accumulation as it transports out. Again, this is on the bottom left. It rides on a lower conveyor. These empty pallets are then brought to the robots to be palletized and then discharged on a higher level. So that dual layer could be difficult to be able to present in a 2D layout. The same thing is true for the cases coming in. We've got multiple levels that are being fed to the robot. In this example, we can see that there is a large layout here. There are some independent rovers that are transporting material, again on an over-under scenario configuration with full pallets on top and empty pallets at the bottom, but it lends to a open concept and a lot of open space in this facility for this particular customer. As the animations get refined, we can move on to a simulation level in the digital twin design. This allows us to do some line performance evaluation, putting some hard numbers to what the performance characteristics of the solution should be. We can explore what-if scenarios. We can do some optimization, and finally, we can actually demonstrate the concepts without physical product. In this example, we can see a small layout. You can see the products moving around. They would get packed by the robot. That's not necessarily animated, but the process flow is accurate for what this equipment needs. There's two charts there that are actually collecting data. We evaluated this over a 8-hour run virtually, so it was done much faster actually. But we were able to punch in the numbers of the performance equipment rating for the case erector, case packer, and case sealer, and over the virtual 8-hour run, we were able to see the results. In this following example, it was necessary to run a simulation to be able to accurately predict and share the concept for this solution. The product cycle is fairly unique. 60 products can be delivered within 7 seconds, followed by a 10-second dwell, followed by another 60 products, and again a 7-second period, and then there's a long cycle dwell in the production of 132 seconds. The challenge is you have to be able to capture all of this product and then be able to space it out at a 12-inch pitch downstream. That's pretty wordy and pretty difficult to kind of communicate and demonstrate. Here we've actually done that. We can see that we've got 60 products that are feeding in very quickly, again in that 7-second period. And then they station and hold there while the previous cycle was completing. After the 10-second dwell, we can see we've got another 60 products feeding in an adjacent lane. As that makes it to the end of the conveyor, it pauses and waits, and now we're in this long dwell period as we continue to discharge the material at the 12-inch spacing that was required for the customer, all in a single line of product. One of the questions that came up early on in the project design was, why can't we make the conveyor shorter to be able to handle all of this accumulation? So we looked at the traditional design, and that's what's showing up on the spreadsheet here, and trying to share that information and communicate that effectively with the customer was difficult. Even communication between engineers within the team, there were several points of communication that were missed and had to be clarified several times as we kind of refined this model and showed the demonstration of how this thing would actually function and really work. There's a lot of detail happening, and the concepts are not straightforward as you try and consider all of the different things that would actually happen. So let's go ahead and speed this up just a little bit as we finish out the cycle here at a 4x speed, and you can see as the product is approaching the end of this 132-second cycle, we're actually overlapping slightly as the next set of product come in, and we continue the line segment here. So it really was necessary to have this conveyor as long as it was. You can see that it completely fills the space there after the diverter. Now, as we look at some other examples, of course, there's more than one recipe that's happening for this particular customer. So up on the top left, you can see the example that we just walked through for their maximum cycle. To the bottom left, we have a different product size and spacing, and the bottom right is a smaller product spacing requirement. There's fewer products. So the conveyors are designed and set up so that it can actually feed the product quickly to the end and keep the product flowing at a consistent rate through the system, at least as much as it is delivered to the end of that line. So there's a lot of flexibility here in the system as we look at the number of different products that can be serviced. And again, the length of this conveyor was necessary because of that largest batch of products that would be delivered to it. As we actually look at a different section of this particular line, we can see that at the front of the system, we had to be able to accumulate a lot of product very quickly and then discharge it. Here in this section of the machine, we're actually also accumulating product in the event that something downstream, the process stops for some reason, and we need to be able to still accumulate and hold that large quantity of product that's coming from upstream. Go ahead and speed this up a little bit as we watch this particular accumulator fill up, and we'll see how it can handle a lot of product. There's a lot of accumulation as this continues to fill up. There's 5 lanes of accumulation in this particular design. Again, the downstream process is stalled or not functioning for whatever reason might be involved in that downstream process. The 4th lane now filling up gives us a lot of time to be able to service a piece of equipment again if it's down. So as that process restarts downstream, we can discharge this accumulator and continue to keep the product flowing both upstream and downstream while holding a large quantity here in the middle. It's a pretty unique design, and we were able to work through that in this simulation world. You can imagine that you might spend a lot of time with real product trying to evaluate this and make sure that everything was actually functional in the code, and code with little bits and pieces can be exciting to try and solve all of those problems. So this is a pretty valuable tool to be able to get all this sorted around and demonstrate and lend confidence to ourselves and the customer. Emulation is the next phase in the digital twin technology, and as a controls engineer, this is by far my favorite and most exciting part of digital twin technology. It allows us to write real PLC code and robot code and be able to test those things on virtual equipment well before the equipment's available, and it gives us real confidence in how our code is written and the ability to prove it out. Let's look at an example of emulation. In this particular example, it may look like a roller coaster ride, but this is a real solution that was delivered. The equipment was sent to site. It never came to our facility, so we never had the opportunity to examine or program or do anything on the real equipment. So the best solution that we had was build it virtually and be able to understand how to program and control this. What we're looking at right here is a discharge clamp release mechanism for these empty cardboard boxes that will be delivered to the system. This is one that we hadn't had any program code for previously, but we were able to design that and get that working from a code standpoint. Further up the line is a similar release mechanism, but we thought that we could reuse the code there, but it actually shows that we weren't able to do so. The other benefit was that we were able to load up the system and test scenarios where cases might be up high, and we wouldn't be able to to clear out the jam or be able to get to it. The second level here that we can see is about 15 feet in the air, and the very top level is at 32 feet in the air. So if we've got a jam or a situation that we can't recover from, it becomes very difficult to code for that and understand how to recover it. So using the emulation world, we're able to set up those scenarios and those jam conditions and know what the position of our photo eyes should be and the discharge times and durations so that this system will function and behave as expected. After visiting with the technician who got in the field to do this work, he was really surprised at how closely this model matched the real equipment, and it really reduced our amount of time on site and the ability to be able to put the equipment into service. So that's one way that emulation can help us validate test cases, recoveries, jam scenarios, and be prepared before we go to site for the customer. I really like this next example for a number of reasons. One, you can see that we have demonstrated there were some product challenges in the conceptual design and the controls work, and that's illustrated in this other video here as well, as we are trying to upend this product from a flat orientation to a vertical orientation. Um, it's not controlled as ideally as it could be. So a couple of things that we did to mitigate that was, one, we were able to use emulation to develop the PLC code and servo code for these mechanisms. As you can see in this example, it's working much better, and that was through the emulation process. We're standing the products up, forming patterns so that they're ready to be placed in the box at this hand pack station. The second thing that we were able to do was make sure that this code was ready before the equipment is actually on site at our facility for testing. Again, accelerating the commissioning process, we were able to do that. Here you can see an actual example of this machine working and some of the other items that needed to happen in order to mitigate the product handling and the control and so forth. So here the product's getting upended and stood up nicely. It forms the pattern as expected. We're preventing the product from tipping over at the first stage there. And then as we look at the final products here, you can see that the patterns were formed and transported down the conveyor in preparation for that hand pack. There are a number of elements that I wanted to talk about in this last emulation example. One is code development. We can see that we are operating mechanisms as designed by the mechanical engineering team. These are being controlled through the emulation software as they would be in the real life. You can see that as the lane fills up, we can sweep the product across the conveyor and into the pattern forming zone. The robot, when a pattern is full, can then pick that pattern and deposit it in the boxes. The box section was not developed at this point in the stage, so we aren't concerned that it's not getting in the box at this point. You can see here that we're making some adjustments to the pattern forming zone, which adjusts the size of the pattern. That was one of the principles and concepts that we were trying to validate. So not only can we do code validation, but we can actually validate the concept and principles of operation of the machine and then document it. You saw a moment ago where we were able to reject products out of the machine. If something were to get tipped over or not picked up by the robot for some reason, there is a method to clear that out and allow it to continue to run. And lastly, we'll point out that there's a little blade stop between the lane of infeed and the product that prevents it from pushing out or getting tipped over when a lane is when the pattern forming area is cleared. Finally, you can see the real operation of the machine and how this functions with the code that was developed in emulation. One thing that we will point out here is that the code, when dumped into the real processor, we tried to execute. There was some errors and things didn't behave as expected. Through a quick analysis, we were able to identify two sensors that were wired backwards, and two sets of valves that were also plumbed in reverse. So having confidence in our code that we had proved out in the emulation allowed us to troubleshoot and diagnose the problem with the machine much faster. We were really able to accelerate towards a operational and functional machine at that point and start diagnosing other concerns and issues that might arise. So in conclusion, digital twin technology allows us to be able to animate, simulate, and emulate to be able to achieve a risk reduction for all stakeholders involved in a project.